Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Take out a sheet of paper and follow along with me. My name is Travis Collier. I'll be teaching this class with Coach Bill Colbert. He's right there on the right in this picture. And we'll be teaching this class together this year. Now, for this week, I didn't want to get started on any math topics. We'll get to that next week. But this week, I just wanted to do a little lecture one about the syllabus, just going over it, making sure you know what's going to be required of you this year. Okay. Now, for this class, Algebra Functions and Data Analysis, this is not an SOL class. So there's no SOL at the end. No SOL for this class. And there's no final exam. But typically, this is the last math credit that you need to graduate. So you do need this class to graduate, even though it's not an SOL class. Some of you have already filled out your Google form. That's great. If you haven't done so yet, I'll tell you more about it at the end of the lecture. And as far as these lectures go, I like to keep them really short. So I typically go for about 30 minutes and then I stop. But yeah, this is basically how it's going to go. I'll usually talk for about 30 minutes and that's it. Now, if you ever miss class and you want to see what we talked about that day, what I always do is after these lectures, I'll post them onto my Canvas module so you can go back and you can rewatch them later. So that's always going to be available for you. But since this is second block, we're going to be meeting on Mondays and Wednesdays. So Mondays and Wednesdays, always at 9:45 a.m. That's never going to change. Okay, so what is this class about? What kind of assignments are you going to be doing? We're going to cover that a little bit later, but I did just want to go through the syllabus and just hit the major points before this is over. If you ever need to contact me or get in touch with me, I'll put my email address down and I'll put Coach Colbert's email as well. Mine is tcollier at halifax.k12.va.us. So that's my email address if you ever need to get in contact with me. Coach Colbert's email address is going to be bcolbert at, same thing, halifax.k12.va.us. So if you ever need to get in contact with us, those are the two email addresses that you need to know. Okay? Let me talk about office hours real quick. And that's going to be on the next slide. So I'll give you guys a couple minutes to copy this down, and then we'll move on to the next slide. But this class is not an SOL course, so you're not going to be taking an SOL at the end of it. There is no final exam, so the entirety of your grade is going to be based on classwork, quizzes, and tests. And I'll talk about that a little bit later. Okay. Let's go on to the next slide and let's talk about office hours. If you ever need help during the class, do know that I do have office hours Monday through Friday, and it's always going to be at 2:15 p.m., 2:15 in the afternoon. And it usually stretches all the way to 3:30. But if you need help at a different time, just email me beforehand and then we'll set up that meeting for you. So that's if you ever need help in the class. You'll always have my office hours to help you. Okay? So let's talk about the course description a little bit. What's this class going to be like? Course description. Okay. Algebra functions and data analysis. So this class is going to be a mix of Algebra 1 and Algebra 2. So some of the topics that we talk about come from Algebra 1, but some of the topics that we talk about come from Algebra 2. Now, if you're just coming from Algebra 1 and you pass the Algebra 1 SOL test, a lot of the stuff that we talk about in class is going to be familiar to you. You've already seen it. But there are some topics that we take from Algebra 2 that you may not have seen yet. So it's really just a mix of Algebra 1 and Algebra 2. You know, some kids were not able to pass the Algebra 1 SOL test, so they need that Algebra 1 review to help them pass. Because you do need to pass one math SOL to graduate, but you do need 3 math credits. And typically, this is the third math credit that you take. So this is typically the third math credit that you'll take. Okay. All right. So that's the course description. And mainly what's going to be happening is you're going to be doing classwork, quizzes, and tests. So let's talk about how the class is going to be run. Mondays and Wednesdays, you're going to be coming to my Zoom lectures. So the Zoom lectures will come first. You're going to take notes on Mondays and Wednesdays. And then when you're done with the Zoom lectures, you're going to try the problem sets that I post. The problem sets. And the problem sets are really practice. I don't grade these. So the problem sets are going to be practice. Typically 10 questions, not much more than that. These are just practice problems and they are ungraded. So they're not going to factor into your grade. But I do expect you to do them. Now, since these are practice, what I'll usually do is I'll write up the answers and I'll put them at the end of the page so you can check yourself as you're doing the problem sets. And when you get done with the problem sets, you feel like you know the stuff, you know exactly what we're talking about, and you're ready to start your assignments. Then what you'll do is you'll do the classwork, and this is graded. So the classwork is typically going to be 10 questions, just like the problem sets, except these will be graded. Okay? Now, sometimes you'll be doing classwork, sometimes you'll have a quiz to do, sometimes you'll have tests to do. Now, typically, when I do classwork, quizzes, and tests, I'll only have 2 tests per 9 weeks. So you'll have 2 tests for the first 3 months, and then the last 3 months, you'll have 2 tests. So you'll have 4 tests in total when you get done with this course. And then all the other assignments are either going to be classwork or quizzes. And I'll talk about that on the next slide. So I'll keep this up there for a few moments so you guys can copy that down. And then we'll move on and we'll talk about how your grades are going to be taken and what's going to factor into that. Okay. So typically what will happen is for any given week, you'll have 2 classwork assignments. And both of those assignments are going to have 10 questions. You're going to show your work. You're going to show your answer. You'll take a picture of your paper with your phone and then upload that picture to Canvas. So that's one way you can turn in your assignments. Another way that I've seen is kids will take their Chromebook and they'll take a picture of their paper. I'm not really sure how they do that. I'm not really that tech literate, but I have seen kids do that in the past and it works out well for them. But basically, the problem sets, we'll talk about them in the Zoom lectures. I'm not going to grade those, but I expect you to do them. And then classwork, that's what I'm actually going to be looking at. That's how I'm going to give you your grade. Okay? So let's talk about the grade breakdown. How are your grades going to be taken? Okay. So you're going to have classwork. You're going to have quizzes, and you're also going to have tests. Okay, so the classwork and the quizzes, those are going to combine to give you 60% of your grade. So 60% of your grade is just going to be classwork and quizzes. That's the majority of it. And then the other 40% is going to come from your tests. So tests actually not as important as classwork and quizzes. And then there's the grading scale, which I'll spend a minute on. Just like last year, the grading scale has not changed. So let's talk about the grading scale. Okay, so A is going to be 100 to 90. B is going to be 89 to 80. C is going to be 79 to 70. D is going to be 69 to 60. And then F is going to be 59 and below. So that's the grading scale. It hasn't changed since last year, but we are doing a 10-point grading scale. So that's the only difference between now and 2019. Okay. Now, the lowest passing grade that you can possibly get is going to be that 60. That's the lowest grade you can possibly get and still pass. Not that you're actually shooting for that, right? But that is the lowest passing grade. Okay, so that's the grading scale. And I'll leave that up there for a few seconds so you guys can copy that down. We'll move on. We'll talk about the rest of the class and how it's going to be run. Okay, so let's talk about assignments. How's that going to go? Assignments. Now, whether we're talking about classwork, quizzes, or tests, everything is going to be due by Sunday. Everything is going to be due by Sunday. Before midnight on Sunday, so 11:59 p.m. If you turn it in any later than that, that's when I start taking off late points, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But all assignments are going to be due by Sunday on that week. So everything is due on Sunday. Everything must be uploaded to Canvas. So assignments must be uploaded to Canvas so you can actually get your grade. If something weird happens and you're not able to upload, just email it to me. Tell me why you weren't able to upload it, and hopefully I can fix it. So you do have that option if nothing works out for you. You can email it to me. Okay, so there are 3 policies that you need to know about. 3 policies, and I'm going to change to red for this. Okay, the late work policy. Let's talk about that. Late work policy. The late work policy, I'm going to take off 5 points per day. So I'm going to take off 5 points per day. The assignment is late. So that's my late work policy. And eventually, after 20 days, you'll have a 0. So don't let it get to that. That's my late work policy. Okay. The second policy that we need to talk about is the resubmission policy. Resubmission policy. Let's talk about that. So once I grade your classwork, and let's say you get a grade that's lower than you expected, you can actually redo the assignment and resubmit it for a higher grade. So any grade lower than a 100, any grade lower than a 100 can be resubmitted. As long as you're within the due date guidelines, you can resubmit a classwork, a quiz, or a test. So any grade lower than a 100 can be resubmitted. And I found that last year, a lot of kids wanted to redo their assignments so they can get those missing points back. And I let them do that last year. So I'm going to make it a policy in my syllabus this year that any grade lower than a 100 can be resubmitted. As long as you're before the due date of Sunday, you can resubmit that assignment. Okay? So that's the resubmission policy. And then the last one that we need to talk about is the no work policy. And I'll put this in quotation marks. The no work policy. Okay. For any assignment, typically I'll have 10 questions. You need to show your answer and you need to show your work. Okay? So you need to show work with every answer. Show work with every answer. If you don't show work with your answer, then I can only give you half credit. I can only give you half credit. So don't let it get to that. For every single problem that we do in class, and every problem that you do for homework or quizzes or tests, you must show work with your answer. Okay? Now, how are you going to show your work? Well, I'm going to show you how to do it on lectures, on notes, on problem sets. When I include the answers at the very end of the problem sets, I'll show you how the work should be done. And the same way I do it during the Zoom meetings is the same way I want you to show it on your homework. You must show work with every single answer. And if you just write down an answer, I can only give you half credit. So just do a favor for yourself and just show your work for every single answer. And if you have problems with showing your work, get in contact with me. Come to my office hours and I'll help you out as much as I can. So those are the 3 policies that I'm going to keep in place this year. The late work policy, the resubmission policy, which will really help you out because you can resubmit any grade lower than a 100, and the no work policy, where you need to show work with every single answer. And I'll show you exactly how to do that on notes and at the Zoom meetings. Okay? So I'll leave that up there for a few moments so you guys can copy that down. And then I'll spend the last 10 minutes talking about required materials and what the class is going to be like. And by the way, if you have any questions while I'm doing these Zoom meetings, you can throw them down in the chat box and I will get to those eventually. Typically what I'll do is I'll wait till the very end of my lecture to answer questions. So you are going to have to wait a little bit. But if you do put them in the chat box, only I can see your questions that you put in the chat box. So don't be afraid to send me a question. If you don't understand something, I will get to it. It'll just be at the end of the Zoom meeting. Okay? All right. So we talked about the 3 policies for assignments. We talked about how grades are going to be calculated. And the last thing we need to talk about is the required materials. And I'm going to cover that on the next slide. So let's talk about that. Okay. So what's going to be required for the class? Let's talk about that. Required materials. Okay. So number 1, you're going to need your Chromebook, obviously. Now, if your Chromebook isn't working or if it's damaged in some way, you need to contact the high school as soon as possible. So that's the Chromebook. Also, you're going to need notebook paper, obviously, right? Every single assignment you're going to be doing on notebook paper, and you're going to be taking a picture of it and uploading it to Canvas. Usually, I tell the kids to get the college ruled notebook paper. You can fit a whole lot more on the college ruled paper than you can on the wide ruled. But I'm not going to not accept it if it's not on college ruled notebook paper. But I do recommend that. You're also going to need graph paper for when we start graphing. The only place I've ever found this graph paper stuff is either at Walmart or Amazon. Okay, so those are the two types of paper that you're going to need for the class: regular line notebook paper and graph paper. Pretty simple, right? You're also going to need a 1-inch binder to put all your stuff in. A 1-inch binder. That really helps you out when you're trying to organize everything. And then the last two things you're going to need is obviously a pencil or a pen. I prefer pencils, but whatever. And then the last thing is a ruler for when we start graphing. And those are the required materials. That's pretty much it. I'll keep that up there for a few moments, so if you're copying that down, you can get that. But if you don't get it, you can find it in the syllabus later. Okay? So I have two more things that I want to talk about before I let you guys go, and that's how you can get help for the class and what's going to be due this week. So on the next slide, we're going to be talking about those two things. Okay. So let's say you're doing your problem sets or you're doing your classwork and you're not really getting it. You need extra help. So how can I get help? How can I get help in this class? Well, there are three major ways. The first thing you can do is just send me an email. If you have a specific question, then probably email is the best thing to do for that. You just get me at my school email address. The second way is by coming to my office hours. And office hours is just like my Zoom meetings. It will be this black chalkboard screen, and I'll be helping you out with any questions that you might have, whether it's the practice sets or if it's the graded classwork. I help everybody out with all those questions. So my office hours are always going to be at 2:15 p.m. Send me an email before you come to my office hours so I know you'll be there. So that's the second way you can get help in the class, is by coming to office hours. And I help anybody who comes to that. And then the third way is I do have a YouTube channel. I do have a YouTube channel where I post all my math videos for the course. I do have a YouTube channel. And the way you find my page is you have to search my first and last name. So you're going to be searching Travis Collier. And then at the end, maybe write math at the end of that. So you'll actually find me. But this is where I post all the videos for the course, whether it's the AFTA course that I teach, or whether it's the Algebra 2 or the Algebra 1 that I teach. I put all my videos on there, as well as on my Canvas page. So I do have a YouTube page where I post all my math videos. And those are the three basic ways that you can get help in the class. So never feel like you're alone. You know, I know it's hard, but if you really do want to get help, there's a bunch of ways you can do that. And my office hours are going to be on every single weekday, Monday through Friday. So if you need help, just send me an email. Join my office hours on my homepage. There's this little button at the bottom of my homepage called Office Hours. You just click that at 2:15 and I'll be there. Okay? And then the last thing I want to talk about today is what's going to be due at the end of the week. So every week you're going to have assignments, whether it's classwork, quizzes, or tests. So what's due this week? What's due this week? Good question. What's due this week? Let's talk about it. Okay. So if you go to my modules page, and you go to week 1, it's the only week that's available, and you go to Friday, you will see something called Google Forms. You need to click on that, fill out the Google form, and then submit it. And then at the end of the week, I'll look at it, make sure you've done it. And if you did, I'll give you your first 100 classwork grade. Now, some of you have already sent those in. Thanks so much for that. I pretty much got half of all my students already to do that. But if you haven't done that yet, do it right after this lecture. Go to my modules, go to week 1, scroll to the bottom. There's going to be something called a Google form, and you just fill that out and submit it. And what that's going to do, and that's going to help me better understand you, which class you're taking, and how you learn in a classroom environment. So that's going to help me out so much. And that's the only thing that's going to be due this week is that Google form. Okay. All right. Once again, I do record all of these meetings and I post them on the module page. So if you ever miss them, you can rewatch them there. And I don't think I have anything else to talk about. I usually answer the chat box questions at the very end. If you have no questions, you can go. I'll see you on Monday for our first day of actual math. So that'll be fun. You guys have a good weekend.